While I might be a little bit disappointed when it comes to Square Enix and their handling of the big Final Fantasy games on the Nintendo Switch, one thing that I'm not disappointed with is how they've handled the Nintendo Switch with the birth of a new style of game with HD 2D and Octopath Traveler back in 2018. This birthed a whole series of games in the HD 2D engine style that has brought the classic gameplay of yesteryear of the Super Nintendo days and brought it to a modern audience with new visual techniques, but keeping that classic old school style that players know and love from the golden era of gaming. And that is not lost on the release of Octopath Traveler 2 for the Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, and also PC. Right now on Metacritic, we're going to be looking at some of the scores here, and things are looking incredibly good. And this is probably going to be Team Asano's highest rated HD 2D game right now at this point, based on what we're seeing. So right now, there are 23 critic reviews on Metacritic for the Nintendo Switch version of the game. There's less for the PS5 version of the game, but essentially they're identical with the exception of the PS5 version having higher resolution. It does have a 4K output. Switch is 1080p 60, and the PS5 version looks better when it comes to some of the effects and everything, but they're pretty much the same game. Same goes for the PC as well in terms of your graphics card and what you can run and all of that, your monitor, all that good stuff. Now, let's get into the scores here because that's what's important. Doesn't matter the platform you're playing on, all that matters is how good the game is, and things are looking incredibly good with an 86 average overall. Once again, higher than previous HD 2D games and higher than Octopath Traveler 1 with its 83-ish average depending on what platform you're playing it on, and higher than games like Triangle Strategy and Live Alive. So very good. And even if you want to go outside of HD 2D with Team Asano, Bravely Default 2 definitely has a higher rating than that game as well. So far, looks like Team Asano's highest rated game ever is right here and ready to go with Octopath Traveler 2. Now, if we get into the scores here, we've got two perfect scores. We're going to break it down with the top scores, middle scores, and then the lower scores. Dextero, a 10 out of 10, and had this to say: Octopath Traveler is ideal on the Nintendo Switch and lends itself well to bite-sized portable gaming, although it's also a game that can be treated as a huge epic adventure when played on PlayStation or PC. If you're someone who doesn't enjoy retro-stylized JRPGs like the older Final Fantasy games or didn't take to the original, then Octopath Traveler 2 is unlikely to win you over. However, if you do, or fancy giving them a try, then this sequel represents the very pinnacle of the genre and reminded us why games like this are so celebrated and timeless. Octopath Traveler 2 is all about losing yourself in mini stories that connect to a wider, more epic tale. A little bit like The Lord of the Rings or A Song of Ice and Fire / Game of Thrones in that regard. It's also a game that lets you flex your strategic muscle as it plays on your nostalgia, all while delivering something new. And that's the most awesome thing about Octopath Traveler and a lot of these HD 2D games. But it seems like it's been taken up to the next level with Octopath Traveler 2, fixing many of the issues that the original Octopath Traveler had back in 2018. Next up is from God is a Geek. They gave it a 10 out of 10 perfect score and had this to say: Octopath Traveler 2 is a spectacular sequel and the easiest recommendation I could ever give to RPG fans. So nothing better than what was said right there from God is a Geek. Next up is from Nintenderos with a 9.5 out of 10, and they had this to say: Octopath Traveler 2 corrects all of the flaws of its predecessor to become not only an exemplary sequel, but also one of the best RPGs in the Nintendo Switch catalog. Its stories are mature and deep, its gameplay remains classic and challenging, and its graphics and soundtrack are still outstanding. A great victory for all fans of conventional RPGs. Awesome stuff there from Nintenderos. Next up is from Siliconera with a 9 out of 10, and they had this to say: Octopath Traveler 2 opens with the promise of adventure and journeys that show how characters grow and shape the world, and it sends you across a lavish world as you help each individual and, along the way, make Solistia a better place. There is so much potential here, with everyone able to choose how they approach it all. More importantly, it's approachable, ensuring everyone can appreciate the stories Square Enix and Acquire will tell. Awesome stuff there as well. So much praise from these top scores. Next up, 9 out of 10 from Nintendo Life, and they had this to say. Octopath Traveler 2 is a triumphant and confident follow-up to its predecessor, building on the established foundation with welcome new ideas and tweaks that make for an overall excellent experience. A strategic combat system, open-ended character progression, well-written stories, gorgeous visuals, and an incredible soundtrack all coalesced into one of the finest RPGs available on the Nintendo Switch to date. Though it may be more of the same, Team Asano demonstrates mastery of its craft at every turn here. We'd give Octopath Traveler 2 a high recommendation to anybody looking for a beautiful new RPG to add to their Switch collection. Very, very good review there as well. Next up, we're going to go into some of the high 80s/80 scores. Spazio Games with a 8.8 out of 10, and they had this to say. Overall, looking at the quality of the writing, the measure taken to satisfy certain segments of the public who had criticized the predecessor, the visual splendor and the magnificence of the combat system, Octopath Traveler 2 is not only a first-rate JRPG, but also a superior product to its direct prequel in many ways. Awesome stuff said from there. Next up is from Press Start Australia with the 8.5 out of 10, and they had this to say. Octopath Traveler 2 does an earnest job of trying to right the wrongs of its predecessor, making more attempts than ever to integrate the stories of its 8 characters. While the result falls slightly short of this promise, Octopath Traveler 2 offers everything the original did and more. It's a stellar RPG with a fantastic presentation and mechanically robust gameplay systems that any genre fan shouldn't miss. And it's interesting to say that they didn't quite live up to that, even though that we've seen that there are the interconnected stories. So I wonder exactly how it's broken down to where Press Start Australia feels not quite what they were trying to set out to do. All right, next up is from Game Informer with a 8.5 out of 10, and they had this to say. Octopath Traveler 2 does what an excellent sequel should. Instead of breaking new ground left and right, it improves on the original in nearly every way and feels more confident about the stories it tells. There's still room for improvement in some of its stiffer areas, but Octopath 2 is a sterling achievement all around. Very good stuff there, and they kind of feel maybe a little bit the same way. Hey, there's some stuff that they can improve upon, maybe in an Octopath Traveler 3. Next up is from Shack News. They gave it an 8 out of 10 and had this to say. I give Square Enix and Acquire Corp props for ambition, but there's still a ways to go before Octopath Traveler lives up to its potential and reaches its form. Gotta reach the final form like Frieza here or something like that. How about Super Saiyan? All right, next up we're going to get into some of the 70s scores here. CG Magazine gave it a 7.5 out of 10 and had this to say. Octopath Traveler 2 makes a number of improvements to the original, yet is still an extremely similar game, for better and for worse. Okay, so there was some talk about them not changing up some stuff here and there, that it feels the same, and I think that's kind of what a sequel's supposed to do. I'm not exactly sure what people are expecting. Sequels do feel the same as the predecessors, but hey, it is what it is. There are some good things, and maybe if you don't like that as much, then it's going to harp on some of the things that you don't like. So I can understand it from that standpoint. Next up is from Nintendo World Report, and probably the most surprising review so far from Nintendo World Report, a 7.5 out of 10, and they had this to say. On the whole, Octopath Traveler 2 is soundly an improvement on the original, but it's been quite a long time since that first game, and the impact of the visuals and ideas aren't as fresh as they once were. This game will not solve the issues people who bounced off the first game want to see solved, as the stories are still disconnected and dungeons mostly amount to straight paths with treasure chests dotted along the way. However, if you really enjoyed Octopath Traveler and want a better improved version of the combat and overall exploration, Octopath Traveler 2 will deliver that in spades. This is a strong RPG that I enjoyed my time with, but it's not a bold new step forward. Instead, it moderately iterates on the enjoyable formula to good success. So it's interesting that they talk about disconnected stories. They're still disconnected, although there's actually information in Square Enix saying, no, they're connected. Like we saw the trailers, and there's been other reviewers that say, no, they've connected it this time. So it's very interesting to see exactly where this disconnect from some reviewers with, oh no, the stories are disconnected, and then other reviews saying, oh, well, no, it's there. And Square Enix themselves actually saying, hey, we've interconnected the stories where they interact with each other. Now, here's my best guess to this, is that while the interconnected stories in terms of them interacting are still there seems to be some type of disconnect between all of your party members and everything that happens in the game. So there's maybe some interaction with some characters, but not everything. And the fact that you still have individual stories that are mainly focused on certain characters, and that's the main focus, is probably what's causing this little bit of disconnect between people saying that it still has the same issues, and then other people saying, oh, well, wait a minute, no, they've connected, it's much better, they've improved upon it. So that's what I'm guessing is happening here. The fact that it's still isolated a bit, how you kind of start out with each traveler and they have their own story, and then you link up and then you do side quests and stories with those characters, which is different from the original Octopath Traveler, where it was just pretty much the 8 stories, then you just follow along and then they just kind of tag along for the ride and don't say anything. It's a little bit different here, but maybe it doesn't go as far as some people would have want. And once again, this is a gameplay design with the Octopath Traveler, the 8 different travelers, and how they want to tell stories in terms of how each character came up and how they come together to solve a greater good. So I think it's more of a structured thing too for some people, that they just don't like that style, and that's completely okay when it comes down to it. Now, next up is the last and worst review here from Octopath Traveler 2 so far in its early stage. There's only 23 reviews as of the time that I am recording this video. More will be going up throughout the day. So Inverse gave it a 7 out of 10, which is actually not bad so far. The fact that the lowest score is 7 out of 10, that's actually a good thing. So here's what they had to say. Despite my frustrations with the limited ways that Octopath Traveler 2 improves upon the original, at its core, the game still scratches an itch that no other game can satisfy. I still spent more than 50 hours in the world of Celestia, exploring every part of the map I could and seeking out new stories to immerse myself in. For those who lament the modern state of Final Fantasy or want something that feels truly inventive to its design compared to many cookie-cutter AAA games, Octopath Traveler 2 is a journey well worth taking. So awesome stuff all around when it comes to the reviews here, and the fact that 70 is still only the lowest score is a good thing. Now, I am going to be covering Octopath Traveler 2 myself on the channel. I have not played the demo fully yet, and I have not necessarily laid out my plans, but I do plan on doing a full review of the game, and I do plan on doing some gameplay, first impressions, and all of that. So look forward to that. I still have my gameplay that I'm going through of Fire Emblem Engage, and I really hope to beat the game sometime this week or early next week to get prepared and ready for the launch of Octopath Traveler 2. Now, from what I've seen and from the very little bit that I've played so far, it seems like Octopath Traveler 2 is a very good follow-up and sequel. Now, obviously, it's been a number of years since the original Octopath Traveler game, so 2018 all the way now to this point, 2023. And I think that with this style of game, you probably want to get something out a little bit quicker and capitalize on that momentum, because the longer you go, the more people have expectations for what they expect to be different, yet they don't necessarily understand that, yeah, the game wasn't in development for all that time for every single game, but they still expect there to be more changes. So I think that there's also a disconnect there in terms of what people are expecting and what actually you're getting here. But from what I've read so far and everything that I've seen, it seems like an incredible follow-up to a fantastic game that had some flaws here and there based on how you like to play your JRPGs. Now, another thing that I read more about this game was the fact that the battle system has just been improved in pacing, style, and flow. They've really done a great job of crafting a really good battle system in Octopath Traveler 2 that gives you a bit more tools and options that the original game didn't give you. Because if you're someone like me and you're coming from Bravely Default, for example, that game is the actual basis of the combat system for Octopath Traveler. And Bravely Default, it just has more options. It has more jobs, it has more weapons, it has more everything with Bravely Default. And Bravely Default 2 even takes that up to the next level. So Octopath always felt, or even still feels, a little bit like a light version with the battle system, but it does a lot of the other things that maybe you don't see in Bravely Default when it comes to the aesthetics and when it comes to other things with the story. So they have their own distinct style and flavor and do share the common battle aspects, with Bravely Default being far more advanced when it comes to the job system in the game. But I feel that the upgrades that they've made to Octopath Traveler 2 are fantastic, and there's a demo. That's the best thing about all of this right now. If you're unsure about the game and if you like it and the style of it and the HD 2D, which in my opinion, from what I've read and from what I've seen, is the best we've seen for the Unreal Engine 4 HD 2D system. This is by far the best. It looks absolutely beautiful, especially on PS5. If you're on a 4K OLED, looks fantastic, but looks great on the Nintendo Switch in portable mode or on the Nintendo Switch OLED or even docked up on the TV. I think that this is the time to try it out. This is the time to kind of get into it. The first game was a surprise hit with over 3 million units sold across all the platforms that it's on, with the majority of that being on the Nintendo Switch. I think that Octopath Traveler 2 can have just as much success, if not more, considering that it's launching, especially on the Nintendo Switch right now, in a little bit of a lull period in between big games. Fire Emblem Engage and The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom coming out all the way in May. It's kind of open right now at this point. So I think that Octopath Traveler 2 is going to enjoy some pretty good success on the Nintendo Switch. That demo is convincing a lot more people to jump in, and that does transfer and roll right into the game. So if you're still unsure on whether you want to pick up the game or not, you can always try out that demo, and if you like it, you can take that save and put it right into the main game and continue on right where you left off. So I think it's a win-win for everybody involved when it comes to this, and I'm excited to get into Octopath Traveler myself this upcoming week here. But what do you guys think about Octopath Traveler 2? And of course, check out my other RPG videos if you're into Fire Emblem, The Legend of Zelda, and more. I've got all sorts of stuff that I've done on the channel, and I'd appreciate if you check it out. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll catch you for the next one. Peace out.